and I want to welcome you to the Environmental Sustainability Webinar number 2. Today is Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. This session is being recorded. I want to thank you for joining us early to get connected. That's helped us all to start on time. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Jane. And Jane, if you'd like me to explain the file share pod, I'd be glad to. It's up to you.
Please go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. So you see in the right-hand corner here, I'm moving the pod up a bit. It says File Shares 2 at the very top. And then it says Name and Size. The name of the file, you choose which one you want, and then click on it. It'll become dark blue. And that means it's ready to download. So if I click on one of these, then I can download it. So it downloads to your computer in the place that you normally receive downloads. And right now, if you have any questions about that, raise your hand and I can answer them for you. And Ruth, we want to welcome you. So if you have a microphone, a headset, please get your microphone on. There's a white icon at the top of the toolbar in the Adobe Connect meeting room. If you click on that, it'll ask you to allow or deny. Please click allow, and then it will turn green. All right, Jane, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can take us where you'd like us to go. And this file share number 2 will show up in other layouts as well as this one. So don't get excited about when we move to the next layout. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Kathy. It looks like Sarah has joined us also. Sarah, just so you know, you can click on the icon, the microphone icon up at the top, and click on it, and hopefully you can get your voice connected in. On behalf of Caitlin and myself and our design team for the webinars, we'd like to welcome you to this second of our 3 environmental sustainability webinars, and we hope that you're going to find it of interest. We know you will find it of interest. And I just want to give a really brief statement of purpose of why we're here, an overview of the agenda for the webinar, and also you will have an opportunity in just a minute to introduce yourself, which is why, if you have microphone access, we'd really like it to have you do that. And if you don't have it, we'd like you to put in the chat box your response to the questions. So when we get to the introductions, we're going to ask for your name, your location, and one environmental note of hope. And this is meant to be a tweet, not a long sentence, just a very short something in your life that is giving you hope about the environment and where we are with the environment. So quickly, I'm going to read over our purpose, and it's the reason why Caitlin and I, oh gosh, what was it, about 10 months ago, Caitlin, we started thinking about webinars on environmental sustainability. And Carolyn Bloede and Karen Bain both have helped us design these series of webinars. And we came up with a purpose statement. So I'm going to read it. In fact, Carolyn, maybe you could read it for us. Would you be willing to read it?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me? Our purpose, human-caused climate change, is a defining issue of our time. These webinars focus on the application of participatory methods, the Institute of Cultural Affairs Technology and Participation TOP, and other participatory methods to move local communities and organizations to take just and impactful climate actions. This webinar will be an opportunity to first expand your thinking on environmental sustainability, second, to learn more from specific examples and case stories about engaging communities in climate change initiatives, and lastly, to exchange with others in the field. I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. So we're not a research organization. We're not an advocacy organization. we are a group of people who work with participatory methods to help other organizations do their work more effectively and in ways that empower their members and their communities to help shape their future. And we see many examples as we do our work of organizations and people who are making a difference in the world. So these are the people that we have invited to participate in these series of webinars. And we're very grateful for each of them to take the time, like Daphne, Valeria, Carolyn, Caitlin, to put together presentations to share. The sessions are being recorded, and what we're finding out is they're going to be posted on the ICA YouTube website, and people can share that link with others and let others know about the webinars, and we can increase the number of people who see the material in the webinar by sharing these links, which we will share with you after we figure out how to get those recordings online. It's not as easy as we thought it might be. So the file share pod on the right has a range of things that we and others have uploaded to it, and it ranges from something Daphne sent me that's a very substantive work to my personal eclectic lists of articles and activities that I think have been really interesting to me. So you also can upload things to it, and all of these things will help inform at our top network conference in the fall, our gathering. One of the thematic areas on Sunday afternoon, which is environmental sustainability, and the team working with that will use what you have uploaded as a stimulus to their thinking about the design of their session. I also would like to mention the poll pod to the right, which says, how much more acidic have oceans become since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution? And I see some of you have already found it, but there's an opportunity here for you to answer how you see it, and we're going to reveal the answer at the end. So I've given, I think, a little bit of overview of the purpose and the structure. We will move after introductions into the presentations. Carolyn Bloede is going to start with the Alameda County Sustainability Program, which I've had an opportunity to work with over 10 years. And Carolyn and her team have done some really interesting and inspiring work for the county in which I used to live. And I live in Cuenca, Ecuador now. And she's going to share some of that work with us. Not all of it, but a good hunk of it. And then Caitlin Sarro, who presented in the first webinar, works with ICA-USA in Chicago and has been doing work with ICA's sustainability efforts and some very, very interesting work around the building itself. How has this building shifted from an historic building in Chicago to the GreenRise building? And it's going to be a short presentation, but it's a really interesting one to see what ICA has done both in the physical plant, but also in the community that occupies it. And Valeria Bustos is a sustainable architect in Ecuador. And I met Valeria because I chose her and Apollo's Airbnb because it was a sustainably built Airbnb, and got to meet she and her husband and their wonderful children when I stayed in that Airbnb. And when I moved into Cuenca, we continued our friendship. One of the projects that Valeria has worked on, Valeria and Apollo have worked on, is a domestic violence shelter that was built in Cuenca. And the way in which Valeria and Apollo designed it enabled the women to help build the facility themselves, which has had a huge impact on their self-esteem, their sense of efficacy. And Valeria will be talking about that, as well as projects, some other projects in Cuenca, and principles of sustainable architecture. Daphne is also a colleague and friend who is working with regenerative architecture. And over a year ago, she mentioned that she was building a regenerative structure in her backyard. And so I have prevailed upon her to share that structure with us, but also what's involved in creating a regenerative structure, which not only is zero emission, but it helps regenerate oxygen. And Daphne, I hope I got that somewhat right. We'll finish with talking about, you'll have an opportunity to ask each speaker some questions. I'm the orchestrator of the webinar, so when we run out of time, I will definitely say that we need to move on, but those questions can be answered in more depth at the conference and/or when we have all of the presenters online at once, at which time they will have an opportunity, you will have an opportunity to ask them questions that cut across all of the presentations. Okay, so if there's any questions about the structure or how we're operating or how to be online, I hope all of you know how to go up to that little icon with the person holding up their hand and check the icon for I have a question or a speed up or slow down. Laughter, if you think something's funny, or applause, we can use this as a way also to communicate. So what I'd like to do now is have each of you, and I'll start, but Caitlin, you'll start next to do the introductions. And again, that very pink thing that says introductions in the middle of the agenda pod has name, your location, and one environmental note of hope, and that's a tweet. If you are unable to speak, then please, when it gets to be your turn, type quickly into the chat pod the answers to the question. So I will start. I'm Jane Stallman. I'm living in Cuenca, Ecuador, and one environmental note of hope I have is that Rupert Murdoch's daughter-in-law and her husband, his son, have been investing millions of dollars quietly in climate change actions, and have come out publicly with their support for climate change and the need
Hi,
for
I'm
action.
Caitlin Sarro. I am in Chicago, Illinois,
Caitlin, let's go to
and one
you.
note of hope is that not 30 minutes ago I was walking down the street and someone engaged me in conversation about regenerative soil. So just on the street having an environmental conversation, and I am complete, and I will pass it to Carolyn.
Good morning. This is Carolyn Bloede. I'm in Oakland, California, and one note of hope is the broad mobilization I'm seeing worldwide for climate action. I'm complete, and I'll hand it to Daphne.
Hi, this is Daphne Cothern. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and one note of hope is that we've been doing some water quality testing on the creeks and rivers in our local watershed, and for the most part, they're coming up clean.
Hi, this is Kathy McGreen. I'm in Anoka, Minnesota, and a hope that I have is my neighbor, Carolyn, also plants a large garden. We're in townhomes, but she has an opportunity to plant a very large garden, and she has a worm farm in her garage in the townhome. I thought that was quite fun to learn, and I'm passing to Valeria.
Valeria, you are on mute, so you
Hello.
may want to
Okay.
unmute to respond.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Valeria. Sorry, I can't understand correctly. Can you repeat again, please?
So your name, just share with the group your name, your
Okay,
location,
so my name is Valeria
and one
Bustos. I'm
environmental
living in
note of
Cuenca,
hope.
Ecuador.
Just a short one.
And definitely, I think that it's possible to do many things to care the environment, and it's time to start.
Thank you. And Andrew, you're next in line. We're going down the line on introductions. We're hoping that, oh, fabulous. You're putting yours in the chat box, so let me just put the chat box up a little bit and I'll read it off for you. You're in Chicago, Illinois. You're speaking as a young person. Environmental justice has been a part of my awareness for most of my life. Thank you, Andrew. And then Apollo, would you like to go next? And I know that you don't have voice, so you can type in the chat pod. And while you're doing that, let's go to, I think someone else has put information in. Ruth also doesn't have voice. Ruth Gilbert, usually in Champaign, Illinois, but today in Chicago. I have visited 2 intentional communities doing eco-villages in Missouri and New Mexico. How fabulous, Ruth. We're glad you could get on the call today.
And I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And an
Delaney,
environmental note of hope is that there's a controversial crude oil pipeline that is being proposed to go through the pristine areas of northern Minnesota. And the permitting process has been stalled again, which is great because the more it's stalled, the more likely it is that it might not go through. But because there were concerns raised about how this could impact the Lake Superior watershed. So I am feeling hopeful about, about the defeat of Line 3.
Hello, this is Jasmine. I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois. And an environmental note of hope is just the fabulous efforts from Indigenous and First Nations communities, in particular youth around the world. They give me hope.
Thank you so much.
This is Karen, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
And Karen, you are on mute.
One note of hope is that people are working to harness nature to keep up with sea level rise in the Bay.
Thank you, Karen. And Madeline, I don't remember if, there you go. Madeline, Minnesota, there are so many zero waste options for products now, as well as information and education materials about how to reduce waste. It's much easier to find info on this topic. Thank you so much, Madeline. And Rebecca, I don't know if you have your microphone turned on yet, Rebecca, or not, but you can also type in the chat pod. But I think you can have voice because you've done it before. Okay, I'm not hearing you speak, but we'll come back and check with you. If you can get your microphone turned on and the icon up above, we'll come back and check in with you. Ruth has already spoken, so let's go to Sarah. And it looks like Sarah is typing. Scroll up. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Sarah in Minneapolis, Greta Thunberg and other young folks turning the tide.
Yeah, I can stay for another half hour.
Yes, yes, thank you. Sunny.
I'm in the Denver, Colorado, Rocky Mountain area, and one hope, it's weird, I'm taking a climate science class and have learned a lot of scary stuff, and the urgency has become so in my face. But the fact that it's becoming more known in those who have been conservatively reporting on the urgency because they have to toe the line to some superiors are getting called out on it now. That and the fact that I work with neighborhoods and they're doing action plans, and the city of Boulder has just decided maybe they'll do this too. Let the neighborhoods do plans. That's hopeful for me.
Sunny, congratulations on that work. There's a group of people in Denver that are going to be sharing some of their work and helping to organize neighborhoods on our Environmental Sustainability 3 call. So thanks for highlighting that for us. Now, who have I missed? Rebecca, were you able to get connected with voice? Okay, well, we want to get your voice in the room if we can, and if not, the chat box will work. So it looks like most of you have filled in the poll. I'm going to introduce Carolyn for our next presentation. And Carolyn Bloede, I mentioned before, is the manager of all the Alameda County sustainability projects. It's a very large county. It includes Oakland, Berkeley, Fremont, Union City, and, oh gosh, even out over the hills into Contra Costa County. Well, not Contra Costa County, but over the hills. So Carolyn, thank you for sharing what you're doing, and let me know if there's anything you need for you to proceed. Oh, I know, there is something you need. So I want to mention that this chat pod here, Questions for Carolyn, is a place where you can, anyone on the webinar can type in their questions for Carolyn. She has 15 minutes for her presentation, and she'll have 5 minutes at the end to share with you any questions,
everyone.
discuss with you
Jane,
any
just a
questions
quick sound check. Am I coming in clearly?
Thank you. Carolyn.
That is the large HVAC.
You're coming in clearly, but there is a lot of background
which I can
noise.
do nothing about. So I'm sorry about that. Well, good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Bloede, the Sustainability Program Manager with Alameda County in California. We're located on the east side of the San Francisco Bay. And I'm going to share the story of how we've been putting the action into our climate action plan using broad participation. So let me get started with why climate action matters to us. Well, and it's because climate change directly impacts Alameda County's 1.6 million residents. The light blue on the map in the upper left shows our projected flooding from sea level rise, and that's going to inundate our cities. We're already experiencing flooding from unusual rain. Climate change also means warmer days, making the air quality worse. We have 60,000 children in Alameda County with asthma, and extreme heat is impacting our most vulnerable, and we've also had significant air quality issues around wildfire smoke. So as county government, we're on the front lines of the climate response. Our services assist the most vulnerable, like the elderly, children, low-income communities. We're also responsible for protecting public health and providing emergency response, and we also play a role in how we build our communities. So the irony is that while we're doing all this work serving the community, we're making the problem worse with our use of energy and resources. We have 9,500 employees located in 130 facilities, and all of that adds up to a significant carbon footprint. So because of that, we decided to develop a climate action plan specifically for county services and operations, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. There are other plans that address the unincorporated communities, as well as our 14 cities in the county. So we developed the climate action plan just for county services and operations, and we did this with broad participation. We talked with over 200 employees to get their input on actions we could take. We also wanted broad thinking from across our 20 agencies so we could craft the best plan for everyone. And we also wanted to really build buy-in for the implementation by engaging everyone right out of the gate. Our board adopted the plan in 2010. And the plan included a call to action to take our emissions trajectory from this to this. So the goal we set was a 15% emissions reduction by 2020 and an 80% reduction by the year 2050. The plan includes actions in key areas based on our carbon footprint, like buildings, transportation, solid waste, but we also included actions to prepare for the impacts of climate change. We spent quite a bit of time analyzing the actions, looking at what the environmental benefits would be, what kind of resource efficiencies it would bring, and also the practicality for actually implementing the initiatives. So all of that was fantastic, and everyone was excited, and then we had to actually implement the plan. And often this is when it gets tricky. One of our biggest challenges is building the buy-in and the ownership in a large decentralized organization. We have a 5-member elected board of supervisors, a county administrator, or county executive who are all very supportive. However, our county administrator does not have the same authority as, say, a business CEO or a strong mayor. The agency directors actually report directly into the 5-member board of supervisors. We also have agency directors who are elected officials, so there's a high level of autonomy across the directors. So much of the business of the county is conducted through consensus. We also have 20 agencies with very different cultures. So, for example, the culture in the sheriff's agency is going to be very different from that of public health nurses. And we have almost 10,000 employees, and we also wanted them to make sustainable choices every day. So quite a bit of a challenge to tackle in this process. So we really needed an implementation approach that works. And I give us a star for that broad agency input in the plan development. This really built our network of champions right from the beginning. Excuse me. Our county executive convened a climate executive committee, so we have active participation and sponsorship. We also launched cross-agency teams to develop and implement initiatives. We used a lot of visibility on the outcomes, and we engaged individual employees broadly to take action. So what I want to do is just spend a few moments sharing what that looked like. So the county executive sent out an invite to the agency heads, so we were representing all parts of government. And we really made this a special event, sort of a nice participatory feel. We started building that team right away, and we took a group photo, which we kept using over the course of the plan to remind that they're part of a broad group. And at that meeting, we had the county executive give that call to action to really ask the department heads to sponsor initiatives and actively participate. As we held those first meetings and throughout the course of the work, we really engaged the executives in the decision-making process using participatory methods. So instead of just sitting there, we had them up and engaging with the wall and the material. Ultimately, the directors selected 12 countywide initiatives to advance and sponsor. And then we launched 2 rounds of cross-agency climate action teams to bring those initiatives to fruition and really get them to the point of implementation. And we did a lot of support with the teams to help them scope their initiatives and really move the work forward. So those teams innovated on saving resources and increasing efficiency while also reducing our carbon footprints. And you can see here some of the areas that they worked on. We also had the teams come together with the executive committee quarterly to give an update. My team provided visibility on tracking the progress of the plan. So we used a lot of really simple to understand graphics. And then in addition to the teams, we really wanted our employees to be engaged in setting a culture of sustainability. So we always look for ways to help them make that sustainable decision. And because we can't be everywhere all the time, that's something we put a lot of effort into. We also did things like place messages at the right place at the right time so employees could participate every day, even if it was just a small action. We ran a series of behavior change campaigns like clean commuting, where teams of employees could participate and have competition and fun. This really helped to build the excitement and that sustainability culture. We also had a green meeting certification campaign, and we did that right around the time of the Academy Awards. A lot of people got dressed up, and they were able to walk the green turf, piece of used green carpet that we got from the building maintenance department. Ultimately, we met our 15% reduction target 3 years early, which is really fantastic, but we have a long way to go to meet that 2050 target. Moving forward, we're really looking at assessing the plan for the impacts of climate change, increased temperature, sea level rise, changes in rainfall, extreme events. And particularly here in Alameda County, being right on the San Francisco Bay, we really have to start planning for and addressing sea level rise. You may have seen in the news some of the wildfire smoke events that we've had, as well as extreme heat. Most people don't have air conditioning in Alameda County, so really these are things like the heat and the wildfire smoke that are really impacting communities. In closing, I'll say that I believe that bringing the wisdom of the crowd to tackling climate change is our greatest hope. I think it's really been what has made us successful so far, and it has been a real joyous journey, and I appreciate all the support that Jane has given us over the years, and really, I know for myself and my team, the top participatory methods have really been instrumental in our success. And with that, I'll close, and I guess Jane will take questions at this point.
I have to unmute too, yes. So there's an opportunity to type questions in for Carolyn or to raise your hand for questions that you might have, and I can call on you. Kathy has raised a question, Carolyn, which is, what do you see as a first step to reaching 2050? And Caitlin, can you expand on the different approach you took to engage executives versus the wider employees? So let's start with those two, and I see other people are typing questions also.
Okay, great. Well, one of the things that we're doing right now, so there's sort of two areas of focus, obviously continuing to reduce our emissions and then also preparing for climate change. So we're sort of moving on two fronts and developing ways for the community to adapt to these things that we're seeing, like the high temperatures and wildfire smoke. Really, to reach the 2050 objectives is a major shift in fundamental systems. So one of the initiatives that we've been working on in the county is we have implemented something called community choice energy. So the entire county chose to create its own really nonprofit utility to procure the greenest energy possible across the entire region. And everybody receives that automatically unless they opt out. So that's a major kind of shift in just energy, how energy is created. We are also really trying to shift the transportation as well as our sort of how we're building out communities. I don't know how we get to an 80% reduction. I don't think anybody knows exactly how, but our steps are to really look for radical areas that we can reduce our carbon footprint, and then also really to keep the engagement going across our employees and in the community to bring all of those great ideas and that concept of the wisdom of the crowd to get there. Let's see, Caitlin, can you expand on the different approach you took to engage executives versus wider employees? Yes. So engaging executives, really I think the keys there were seeking the sponsorship of the county administrator, of course in the board, and keeping that in the forefront of the thinking and the priority setting. We've worked to integrate sustainability into the county's strategic vision and some of the major sort of budgeting processes. And we've tried to really translate climate action and climate preparedness to tie directly to the mission of the executives and what they are mandated to do within their agency. With wider employees, people want to take action, so we're providing ways that they can act that are simple as well as sort of larger, more impactful, and really soliciting their ideas and showcasing what they do. Ruth's question, who does all the data input and tracks all the data that comes in? So my team has taken the role of really being a convener within the agency. It's a 10,000 person organization, so we can't do all the work. So we have really shifted our role to be a facilitating group. We still do some programmatic implementation. But one of our key roles, besides facilitating and getting the right people in the room and providing a structure for effective decisions to be made, is gathering the data and keeping the metrics. So, for example, we do the emissions inventory every other year, so we see where we're tracking. Let's see, do you network with other sustainability offices? We spend a lot of time connecting with sustainability offices within our own county, also regionally throughout the state and at the national level. And we really have partnered quite a bit with other counties around the country on policy initiatives as well as implementation. One of our big projects right now is a wildfire smoke communications project, which we've received a national grant, and we have about 20 observing jurisdictions, and the purpose is to create a medical response for wildfire smoke and communicate that out. We have that in 6 languages, communications that are culturally relevant. So really sharing some of that methodology across the country. And Daphne, do you have any means of tracking continued employee engagement interest in the issues? We're doing a lot more a few years ago on the engagement campaigns where we actually have ways that employees can log their actions. Not doing that as much. We are a little bit on the transportation front. We know how many people are using the shuttles. We have an employee health fair where we'll do surveys to get some sense of taking the temperature. It's a big lift to do a lot of this employee engagement work. So we sort of kind of work in one area like we did in employee engagement, and now we're really working to get agencies and the community together to develop solutions around some of these immediate climate impacts that we're seeing. And I think that answered all the questions.
You did. And Carolyn, I would like to mention something that I don't think you hit on in this, is that your team got the Green Purchasing Award. Could you just comment on that quickly?
Yeah, so when we look at climate action, our carbon footprint, we think about not just the emissions that are generated from driving cars and buildings. We procure about $1 billion, that's with a B, in community services and goods. So we have done a complete, what's called a supply chain analysis to look at the carbon impact of everything we procure from its manufacturing on through its end of life, and including constructing buildings and looking at carbon from concrete, the cement manufacturing, to take a much more holistic view of how we tackle our carbon footprint. And surprisingly, that is 3 times the size, that carbon footprint, than our operational footprint. So we're looking at ways to actually tackle that. And then we've also done quite a bit of work taking all of our green procurement and pushing that out to all the cities and other counties and government entities in the region so they can buy off of our publicly procured contracts. Does that answer the question, Jane?
Yes, it does. Thank you for that and the work of your team and the data work that you've done to be able to show that there's impact of your work and what impact is still needed. I'm going to shift us to the next presentation, but I think we should all give Carolyn a round of applause. So if you go up to that little icon, you can find the applause icon to give her. And for those of you that aren't used to it, this is a good way to find it. Carolyn, this was great. Thank you for sharing your work with us, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you as we move forward in the webinar. Our next presenter is Caitlin Sarro from ICA-USA, and she's going to share with us the shifting of this historic building into the GreenRise building. Caitlin.
Hi. So on the last webinar, I spoke a little bit more about our programs, and on this, I will be discussing our historic 8-story building in Chicago, which we call the ICA GreenRise. So covering a bit of our history and then talking about how we're taking this historic building and making it a demonstration for sustainable living and working in a way that is intentional, diverse, and having a small environmental footprint. So a note about our history. So it's a 1920s building. There are still historic elements both on the exterior and the interior. We are an official Chicago landmark designated in 2013, primarily for our terracotta facade, which presents some environmental challenges when it comes to preserving energy. But essentially, we are a piece of history, a piece of Chicago's architectural history, and even gaining this building was a testament to our environment, or our missional work. So back in 1970, December of 71, so 72 is when the building was purchased for $1, so essentially donated to the Institute of Cultural Affairs. And since then, we've been using it for many different purposes, but it originally was an international training center and is now a nonprofit service hub. So just a quick note, as you think about the renovation of the building, keep in mind that these interior and exterior elements, some of them are the cladding, like I mentioned, the terracotta, and then some of them are more accents, so different lighting fixtures, stairwells, the way that the interior spaces are adorned. Something of note is that we consider this building just a demonstration of our overall missional work. So when we think about the way in which we do community development, in many ways this is sort of a microcosm of our overall approach. So we value having this approach that allows for community participation, learning, so sharing our insights with others, and then also having a physical demonstration or building off of something that can capture the imagination and really engage people with something that's tangible. So let's dig into the aspects of our GreenRise. So far, we have been able to accomplish a lot of things. Namely, I think the thing that gets us the most recognition is our 485 solar panels. So we're the second largest roof-mounted solar array in the city of Chicago. And that has been able to provide, we can have 25% less energy taking from the grid. So it hasn't been able to do, we're not zero energy efficient, but we're getting a pretty substantial amount of our HVAC powered by our solar panels. Something else of note is that we were able to do a lighting retrofit for our interior lighting systems. We've been Energy Star certified since 2013, and these two initiatives have really taken a lot of our environmental footprint, and we've been pretty successful with those, just those two, to the point where there is an initiative in Chicago called the Retrofit Challenge, and we've already surpassed our goal. So our goal was to have a 23% energy reduction by, I think, next year, and we were 2 years early by having a 25% energy reduction, which was pretty remarkable considering that we qualify as a commercial building. But I'll get more into the different aspects of the space and how it's used. But before I move on, I'll also say that there's these large-scale initiatives, so the solar panels and the lighting retrofit, which would be a lot of infrastructure improvements, and then there's smaller demonstrations. So we have an indoor aquaponics herb garden, a little greenhouse that's in the community kitchen, and a small exterior rooftop garden to see how we can experiment in some urban agricultural projects. They don't have a huge impact on our environmental footprint, but they offer that opportunity for a hands-on demonstration and experiment in an urban space. If you think about the future of the GreenRise, we are currently planning out what we consider the historic restoration of our building. So we believe strongly about the value of an inherently historic building. Rather than tearing it down and just building something that's LEED certified from the ground up, we want to be able to preserve this asset and bring it into the 21st century. So the values of our historic restoration, I should say, is to be a destination for cutting-edge sustainability, to be financially sound for long-term success, to connect communities within the building and the neighborhood, and quality, having these spaces that are representative of our mission, values, and spirit. You might notice that none of those have specific environmental components to them, but they're good guiding values for any particular project that we take on. And that's the fun part of thinking about the future of this building. We can do a lot of things. We could expand our solar installation. We could build upon our building envelope with what you see in this picture, which is a large glass enclosure that is able to have urban agricultural components built in. A lot is yet to be written, but one thing is for sure that our infrastructure itself does need an upgrade. An aspect of being a 1920s building is that, you know, things are falling apart, but that's actually an asset and opportunity. So a part of this upgrade will be to experiment with innovative systems, particularly mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that we could fold into a whole building approach to really maximize both the space itself and how it functions, and then how that impacts the people that are here. So maximizing comfort, and also an interior space that is able to withstand or last for several more decades. And so why do we do this? Something that's worth noting is this building, originally when we got it in 1972, was occupied just by the ICA, but that's not the case now. We're the largest we're the largest by footprint Midwestern service, social service provider in the Midwest. Sorry, tongue-tied a little bit. So in addition to it being a space for the Institute of Cultural Affairs offices, there's also other nonprofits that do direct service in the community. People come here for counseling, they come here for clinic services, there's educational programs here, and also just human rights advocacy. There's additionally churches and other services, so we're really treating the whole person when you come here. And we try and think of that as part of our mission, and the reason that we're renovating this space is in addition to treating the whole person with our services, we're trying to treat the whole ecosystem. Another aspect of that is this being a building where people are both working and living. There's intentional communities here. people who live together and share resources. They share common spaces, bathrooms, kitchen spaces. There's the larger community is very intergenerational and has around 30 people. The smaller community, I think max is out at about 20 people, and they are drawn together for different reasons, but ultimately their environmental footprint is fairly small, not only because of their own space constraints, but because of the way in which they choose to live their lives. And we very much support this idea of living and working together in community. And my final aspect of this building that I want to highlight is using this demonstration as an opportunity to engage the wider population. So our community at large, bringing people into this space for different trainings on environmental sustainability approaches, having an opportunity for people to dig into our infrastructure systems of the building itself, and providing just an opportunity for people to have conversations within an environmental sustainability community. We try and think about how these all feed into each other. Something I'll note is that we are on the City of Chicago's, like it's not a formal city program, but there's something called Open House Chicago. It's an architectural tour. And many people come here for our architectural elements from the 1920s. But what they tend to leave with is a greater understanding of sustainability at large. They might be attracted by the idea of solar panels and leave with a greater understanding on communal living and community development planning and energy efficient lighting and all the other elements that encapsulate a full system approach. My hope is that we can continue to be a demonstration into the next, the next century, and we've considered different ways that we can structure that. So LEED certification, passive house certification. I know that another speaker will be speaking about the Living Building Challenge. So my presentation is not focused on the specifics of the approaches, but mostly the model and the value of having a demonstration that we can build upon. And I am complete. And I will now turn it over to Jane to orchestrate questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. Your time is actually up. But if there is a very quick question for Caitlin, we will take 1 or 2 more minutes for questions. So you can either type a question or you can raise your hand to say that you'd like to speak. And I see that Daphne's typing, so let's at least take that one. And Daphne, you're also welcome to speak it.
I didn't ask a question, sorry, but I was just, yay.
It's a comment. It's a yay comment.
I appreciate your yay.
Okay, are there any other quick questions for Caitlin? She covered a lot quickly. Those of us affiliated with ICA are very proud of the direction of moving towards a sustainable building, both in the physical plant and the spirit of people working together. And it looks like Ruth is also typing something in, so let's take that before we move to Valeria's presentation. Caitlin, would you like to comment on the challenge of working with all these different groups? I'm sure it is a challenge.
Yeah, I know that my time was quite short, so I'll just say that it is difficult to meet the needs of various stakeholders, but it's helpful to have a team approach. So everyone here, I think, rolls with the idea of wearing many different hats. And we really benefit from having a learning community, not just here in Chicago, but we collaborate with other like-minded folks across the U.S. and sometimes even internationally. So we can all learn from other buildings and other programs that are trying to take a similar way of dealing with what is otherwise considered just an infrastructure problem. What do you do with an old building? And I think that there's lots of approaches that you can take with that, and there's a lot of learning to be had.
Thank you, Caitlin. So let's all go up to the little icon now and clap applause for Caitlin in this presentation as well. And I know, Ruth, you were trying to find how to applaud. It's up at the top of the little icon up on top with person holding up their hands. And if you go there and you click on the downward arrow, you'll have a whole set of choices of things to do. All right. Well, I would now like to move us to our next presentation, which is from Valeria Bustos. Valeria and her husband are friends of mine, and I had the opportunity, as I said earlier, to stay in their sustainably built Airbnb, but I also had an opportunity to visit the women's shelter that they built and see it for real. So I'm very pleased that she's with us today to share their projects with us, particularly the women's shelter. Now, Valeria's primary language is Spanish, and she speaks English very well, but she may be a little bit nervous about presenting, and she doesn't need to be because she's just remarkable. So, Valeria, it's your turn to present.
Okay, good afternoon with all. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this webinar. I am Valeria Bustos, project manager and architect at Alcubo Arquitectura. The firm has been working.
Valeria, honey, this is Kathy. Could you turn your microphone up just a little bit, please? Thank you.
Okay, maybe like this. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, that's great.
Perfect. So, Alcubo Arquitectura has been working for 12 years in the execution of contemporary ecological architecture. It has been developed in 3 central axes: sustainable architecture, bioarchitecture, and bioclimatic architecture. The aims of this kind of architecture are to safety the present needs without affecting the future capabilities. In other words, the reduction of environmental impacts. The buildings at the same time offer quality, comfortable, and healthy spaces that are automatically regulated, low in natural and artificial radiation, while having a low energy consumption and therefore the reduction of CO2 emissions. To achieve a sustainable project, 3 aspects must be considered. Ecological sustainability regarding the care of the environment through the use of eco-materials, ecological sanitation, renewable energy, etc. Economic sustainability, making a thorough analysis between needs and means, as well as value for money and economic efficiency, both in the construction and in the building operation. Finally, social sustainability promotes the participation of the community in general through mingles, workshops, etc. All pictures in the slide show examples of ecological projects built and completed. Next, we will analyze one of our projects. This is Casa de Acogida Ninahuasi, a shelter for women and children victims of violence. This build was constructed with donations from Caritas Austria and other institutions from Ecuador and in the world. The objective was to be an example of sustainable architecture that promotes the healing of victims. It's important to understand a new project as a new opportunity, having an integral vision of it, conceptualizing the project for each case, in this case linked to youth, understanding violence integrally. So it's important also to understand that the space influences well-being of the person, in this case, survivors of gender violence. Casa de Acogida Ninahuasi is a sustainable project. About economic sustainability, we build only what is necessary. considering good value for money and doing some actions like recycle and reusing materials, work management, eco-materials, renewable energy, community work, mingas, etc. The cost for each square meter was $270, very low comparing with the traditional kinds to build. With regard ecological sustainability, we used eco-materials like land, bamboo, wood, natural fibers, recycling, waste, scombros, etc. It's important in a sustainability project, the water care. And we use dry baths, biofilters, rainwater collection, and other systems to care the water. Management and finance of the work, it's from private and public donations, and it's important to care the money. Renewable energies, it's very important part in a sustainability project. We use solar panels, photovoltaic panels, ecological stove, and ecological thermic isolation. In the pictures, you can see the bamboo during the construction and other eco-materials like super adobe in this picture and the other with green, the land walls and the fibers, the natural fibers used for the isolation. It's an eco-isolation. The ground floor is with land, like you see, with a linaza treatment to impermeabilize. Walls, land walls, you can see the work. And we use the land in the green roofs too. In this slide, you can see the dry bathrooms and biofilters. Dry bathrooms is a system to replace the water, the clean water that we use for the bathrooms with dry material to process the organic residues and transform to a compost. And biofilters, it's to care the water and recycle the used waters. It's possible to use these waters again in gardens, in the orchards, and for cleaning and other things. It's important to the rainwater collectors. We are care the water, and it's important to collect the rainwater to use in the gardens and other places. I talk about the renewable energy. This project has a system with 10 solar panels for hot water and 10 photovoltaic panels to generate our own energy. In the pictures, it's possible to see the ecological stoves. It's an interesting system to heater, naturally, of course. The also the heater, eco heaters. You can see we were working with workshops and participating with people. And this is the natural fibers using to isolations. This is an interesting material. It's Sixal. It's very common in the region, in the area, in the land, in the ground of this project. And we collect this material with the neighborhoods and use for isolation. Social sustainability, it implies direct participation of women and children during design and build. The community was involved. We used local materials like jigsaw, workers from the sector, neighborhoods, workshops, etc. The project promotes the collaboration and exchange with public and private institutions, agreements with municipality, states, universities, colleges, high schools, etc. Community work mingas are very important in a project like this. All people works with his own hands in this project. Architects, workers, psychologists, women, children, volunteers, institutions, foundations, universities, schools, family, friends, and the community in general. You can see under the slide the participation during the planning planning workshops with the women, and the participation of the university students. During the construction, all people was involved. Was an amazing experience. Promote this social participation. The women was an important part because this is a house for women, and in this space, women expressed these problems and experience linked to gender violence and found activities in which they could develop. This was a therapy space for the women and for the children. Was very nice to participate with the children, and was a funny time during the work. Many volunteers come from Europe, from Austria, Germany, from the US and other countries to help with this amazing project. And it's so interesting, the social interchange that was possible with this project. And this is the result. This is the house. You can see it's a house built with love, definitely. This is an example of a biofilter. It's the plants and roads, different kinds of roads, cleaning the water. In this picture, it's possible to see the classrooms for the children, and in the other pictures, it appears the green roofs. So, more pictures of this house, the entrance, the principal area, the park for the children, the women houses or women rooms. More, it's possible to see the land on the walls. This is the area of dry baths and other spaces. Inside, it's a warm place. It's a home. It's necessary for the woman, a home, not a build to stay. And in warm areas, it's possible to promote the sanity in the woman. This is the inner areas, the classrooms, the lobby that connects the different areas. In this part, it's the women houses, and this is the psychological offices. And that's it. I hope that the people take these ideas and this kind of build to continue and promote the sustainability in the architecture.
Valeria, thank you so much. And there's some questions for you in the question pod. There's some comments. Gorgeous project. Wow, awesome. but there's also a few questions. And the first one from Daphne and then Ruth is, what is Mingus, and were those composting toilets? And I think you answered that one. But how about Mingus?
Yeah, Mingas. Okay, Mingas are a traditional meat in Ecuador. It's a cultural heritage, definitely, where people meet to help the new couple when they waiting to build the new house for this family. We take this figure to promote the architecture because in Ecuador right now the Mingas are lost. The people are forgetting this wonderful time to share with the people and to help to other people.
Thank you.
About the you're welcome. About the compost toilets, definitely I need several times to explain about it, but depending the place and the climate aspects, it's possible to replace the clean water for a dry material. Sometimes this material includes things like coal or I need ash to replace. The organic disease have a process to convert in a compost, and it's important to separate the liquids from the solid disease. And with the liquids, we create biol to fertilize the ground, and with the solid, we create compost to fertilize and improve the
Valeria, your
land.
time for questions is up, but I see there's a couple of questions here, if you could answer very quickly, with maybe even a yes or no. Carolyn's question on, are the design and construction practices based on historic building design? And Caitlin's, were the university college students gaining academic credit or just for hands-on experience?
The both, the students get credit someone, but other students only had to do the experience and help. We promote the help and the solidarity with this project. This is another, yeah. Sorry, my English is
and
so bad. Yeah,
the design based on historical building design practices.
And yeah, this is a new build, but have a part with an existing build. But it's possible to implement these alternatives in restoration or renovation and an historical build. At the beginning in my job, I was involved in restoration of historical builds.
Valeria, thank you so much for putting this presentation together and sharing the work that you and Apollo have done. I saw the shelter. I saw the impact it had on children who were playing there. I saw the impact on women who were learning trades, and we really appreciate your contributing to our webinar, and let's give Valeria a round of applause also.
Thank you.
All right, we're getting there. We're all going to learn how to do applause by the end of the webinar. All right, well now it's my pleasure to introduce Daphne. And Daphne I met at a book study group we did on the climate of hope. And this was a 7-session series reading Carl Pope's and Michael Bloomberg's work on sustainability projects all over the world. And that's where I got to meet Daphne and learn about the work that she's been doing in regenerative architecture and the project she's building in her backyard. And I have been so excited to actually see a picture of it, which we'll get to see in a second. So Daphne, here you go.
Well, hi everybody. Okay, I'm an architect and am always trying to figure out how you do things better, and got really inspired when I heard the don't do less bad, but actually get to better. And so I've been looking at using the Living Building Challenge as a framework for getting to doing things really well. There's a number of different, well, all right, let me back up a bit. All right, let's hope that everybody does have some passing familiarity. I'm sure Valeria probably doesn't with some of the US-based ideas of green building and some of the programs. LEED has introduced a lot of environmentally responsible concepts in the US and worldwide, which is a good thing, but we can and should reach much higher. We should look beyond even sustainability towards systems which are resilient, which undo damage already done, and move towards regeneration. So I'm going to race through a whole bunch of ideas here to try and introduce that vision of a regenerative architecture that makes a positive impact on its surroundings and people. And the Living Building Challenge is one of the better green building certifications with that kind of vision. I've been using the challenge to shape the goals of a personal construction project, which is still in the middle of construction. And so this is, one case study. And this is a little building that I'm putting up in my backyard for my mother-in-law to eventually live in. So when you're taking a look at regenerative architecture, I think for some aspects of being green, like looking at the soil and the earth, it's easy to see how you can go from being just a little bit better than the conventional status quo to genuinely making things really better, towards a regenerative state. Some of the other aspects that need a bigger shift in perspective, which we'll get to later on. This little picture of poppies here is from my backyard, from this project. The rest of the site has a gravel roadway and it's got messy trenches, but this was part of our erosion control strategy, and it's just been a delight to have something like native wildflowers growing there instead of silt fences. One of the other aspects that's really important is flora and fauna. For our project, we've been working with a wildlife biologist to understand the species that are around or should be around and what their movements are. Our site is here, and so this is a larger area site, and you can see what some of the corridors are. Getting acquainted with the roles that the local fauna play in the ecosystem can be really enjoyable and a good source of inspiration for architectural biomimicry. Our plans include a little mini corridor through the site from the open space above, which is up here, down to some creeks which are below. And we're building artificial habitats like birdhouses and hibernacula and ponds, along with putting in more natural forms of cover and food sources. We've been designing gates that wildlife can pass through while still containing pets and strangers. So it's kind of interesting to sort of think about everybody, all of the stakeholders, including those that generally don't have voices. Water, as Valeria has been talking about, is obviously a really big thing. A friend of mine has described the ick factor in a lot of people's reactions to the idea of recycled water. But if you really think about it, all the water on the planet is recycled. The stuff you drink now has been through the stomachs of dinosaurs. Birds and fish poop in the most pristine of rivers. The good news is that there are several ways to make any water safe for drinking. The hard part, in our case, is not the health department, but it's the level of paranoia of the health departments over something breaking. And that's something that we can solve, or at least I hope we can solve, but we can certainly do it technically. like I said, I'm racing through here, so I apologize. Energy efficiency, everybody kind of understands it's straightforward. Our project will be all electric because we intend to eliminate not only fossil fuel combustion, but also the combustion of any biomass. The concerns with biomass are being able to get reliably produced sources, and with adding more small particulates to the air when it's burned. Carolyn certainly mentioned the wildfires, and that's a big problem in our area. In our case, we've looked at all the renewable energy sources, and solar seems to be the only viable option, hence we have a little photovoltaic array as well. One of the real benefits of the Living Building Challenge is that they don't just accept a design on paper as the final word. They want real-world proof. The building has to be built and occupied for a year under monitoring, and we'll be doing that with this project once we finish the build-out. Pollution is, yeah. So chemical engineers like to say that the solution to pollution is dilution, and this annoys the bejeepers out of me, but unfortunately in many cases it's still true. So the real solution is to not produce the pollution in the first place, as we all know. But finding people who need that waste product as a feedstock for whatever they might be doing is not always easy. It might be a technical thing, it might be a biological thing. I wanted to make the point in looking at pollution from a regenerative standpoint that there are a number of different types of pollution too. It's not just sort of the chemicals that you think of being dumped in a river, but light pollution, noise, and big temperature changes are also kinds of pollution in that they can be extremely harmful. So when we're getting into greenhouse gases, one of the things that I thought is interesting about doing something where you're certifying to a standard is that if you know that somebody is going to be looking over your shoulder at what you use to make your building and making you buy offsets for that, you're going to be a little bit more on your toes, no matter how motivated you were to begin with. So my strategies for that, in this case, have been the obvious ones of reducing the overall materials used and choosing lower carbon options. We did go with a concrete floor, but I really couldn't find a good alternative to that. I would like to say that concrete and metals generally have really great properties which are not easily substituted by other materials, so I'm not an advocate of banding them together. One of the cool things that we found for this project was a heat pump water heater that uses CO2 as its refrigerant. So that was pretty cool. One of the other really important aspects of using a certification like the Green Living Building Challenge is the mandate to keep it local. And keeping materials local has three important effects. Firstly, the money stays within the local economy. Second, there are much lessened transportation emissions as a result. Thirdly, the building becomes more rooted to its place, which echoes and reinforces the local culture. You've got to do a deep dive into a region to understand its climate, materials, society, history, topography, geology, and so on. And can you really reproduce that bank of knowledge for a faraway place to do well by that place? So by staying within a region, you know that your region and your contributions to it can then be more meaningful. Now, social bonds are another really important aspect, and if you're trying to think regeneratively, you want to think about what promotes social connections. Kindness, really. So can you design a space that promotes more open-hearted moods, lessen the intimidation factor of your spaces? Sharing meals is a strong social bond, and so therefore can you design a space to make meal sharing easier? And that goes beyond housing. Shared experiences. Can you design spaces for lots of chance encounters and pleasant chatting? Architecture can't create friendships, but it can go a long way towards creating the opportunities and supporting the habits of friendships. Fairness is a really hard one, I think, to really do in a genuinely deep regenerative way in a building. I think you can obviously consider sort of the working conditions of the people who made the products that have gone into the building and the effects of industry on their community. Are the people who actually put the building together treated well? Is there an oppressive hierarchy expressed in the layout of the spaces, or is there an inherent equitability, in the general program and design? are all the risks and rewards of a project being borne by the same set of people? So this is a deep and obviously complex topic and a difficult one for, just a single person or a small set of people to grasp. But I think we can all take an ethical stand and do what you can. The problem is for me, thinking about how do you sort of get beyond fixing what's wrong and actually getting to making it, positive and better. And then the last piece that I really wanted to talk about is just beauty. People take care of the things that they value. If a place is beautiful, it's more likely to be loved and valued. And that argument alone is a strong incentive for a long-lasting, durable building that won't be wasted by premature demolition or decay. Beauty lifts the spirits and it gladdens the heart. And I believe that the more universal characteristics of beauty to which people respond also have roots in our physiological well-being. Beauty and safety and comfort and health are all linked. So generate a little more delight for the world. And just to show you the framework of the Living Building Challenge, I've put this slide up, which is a bit too much to anybody to go through, but it'll be here for you if you want to download the presentation. The Living Building Challenge is a framework, and there's obviously, it's hard enough on its own, but it's a way of thinking that I would love for everybody else to incorporate as much as possible. Oh, so that's me.
Daphne, thank you so much for this. Kathy has a question for you, and I just have a comment, and it's readable by anyone. So let's start with Kathy's question. Say more about using CO2 as a refrigerant.
Surprisingly, so there's a company called Sandin, if you care, they're doing a heat pump water heater. The refrigerant is the same as it is in any other piece of HVAC or refrigerators equipment. And they're using CO2, which means that it has a global warming potential of 1, unlike many other things that's kind of as low as you can go. So apparently it works really well grabbing heat from one place to the other. However, the cycle, which usually can be reversed on a lot of other things, apparently doesn't work physically as well to make it into a dual heating and cooling kind of thing, but still extremely promising. Sandin, S-A-N-D-E-N. In the U.S., Small Planet Building Supply up in Spokane, Washington area carries it. Other people do too, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
I saw Caitlin was typing, but Caitlin, you could also ask directly by going off mic. Yeah. And anyone else who has a question.
I was just curious about your comments around building social spaces. I loved the idea of architecture can't sort of build friends, and I was just wondering if you had any other comments around building social spaces, particularly in the United States. We're not too keen on that. So just any other insights around building social spaces?
I think there's a lot to be done. Even if you're talking about private housing, which this is this case, but certainly I've also been a design review commissioner for a city, and I think that's one of the important things to do is along the street frontages. Have a place where people can gather. Create a gift for the street, and I think it's really about a lot of chance encounters. I used to work at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and they believed really strongly in having lunchrooms that were in the midst of all these separate little labs and places where people were working on wildly divergent projects, but they would come by, sit down, and have lunch, and talk to somebody else doing something different, and it led to fantastic cross-pollination of ideas, which were great for the organization, but leads to friendships in the same way. And I think it's circulation spaces, corridors, plazas, sidewalks, stairways. I think a lot of those places have the big potential for great social spaces.
Thank you. I was just thinking about my apartment building in Ecuador that has a community room with card tables and art made out of not crossword puzzles, but I guess crossword, where you put pieces to jigsaw puzzles. And the work of the groups that have done them is displayed on the walls, and there's coffee in the lobby, and it's much different than other lobbies. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking these questions and for sharing this, and for your image of the starfish who can regenerate its arms, and thinking about how do we regenerate some of the spaces in our world that have been so heavily polluted and have had such difficult impact for climate change and our world. So this is inspiring and hopeful. And okay, we have one last chance to do a round of applause here, so let's go up and see if we can all give Daphne a round of applause for this great presentation. Thank you so much. And now where we're going to go to, Kathy, if I can find the right slide here, maybe you can find it. Kathleen, looks like you have your hand up. Please go ahead. Thanks, Kath. Kathleen did have her hand up, but it looks like she got bounced out of the room, so we'll give her an opportunity. Oh, no, there you are, Kathleen. Please go ahead and speak. She's typing. So I also want to take just a couple of minutes. This is going to need to be very short because we're a little bit behind schedule. But if you have a question, we call it questions of significance for the panel, questions that might cut across what all of the speakers have talked about. This is the place to ask it. And so I'm going to start and ask our panel to contribute their responses, which is how do we impact the funder community to be able to support projects like these that include such a comprehensive range of considerations, from social connectedness to minimal use of toxic materials to looking at how to engage people in projects. So that's my question. If you would respond to that, how do we get the funder community on board with these kinds of projects? And you can speak, so just speak up, panel. And who would like to start? How have you gotten funders involved?
I think that's a difficult question. I think a lot of people are aware, for one thing, that a lot of green buildings are not yet well appraised for their long-term, better economic and health functions yet, so that lenders and financiers are less willing to give money out for what is sometimes more a capital-intensive project. That's not always true, but it is. But that's kind of an ongoing challenge that's been partially recognized, but not yet well solved.
So this is Carolyn. I'd like to add to that, which would be one of the things after we wrapped up the climate teams, besides showcasing the carbon and benefits, was all the other co-benefits of the work around, letting the staff have executive exposure, building their team leadership skills, the other initiatives not sustainability related that spun off. So I think part of it, Jane, to get to your question, is around telling the story in a holistic way about the connections, so if that's in a grant proposal and framing a broader view, I think we can do much of that through storytelling.
I would also just lift up what Carolyn said about metrics. So I think being able to support your narrative with measurable change. So if that's the number of people involved or the ecological impact, being able to prove some sort of offset that's not necessarily going to be changing the funding scheme, the wide field, but it provides a supporting basis for the work.
I think that's entirely true. I think for the most part right now the approaches still have to be largely focused on owner-occupied buildings, but everybody who does these projects needs to contribute to a database so that there is this growing body of research to show the financial and economic impacts of building like this in all of its.
So this is Kathy, and something may happen soon because Jane has left the meeting for some reason. We have 5 minutes, and she will probably, there she's back now. But I was just wanted to ask Valeria to open up her mic and tell us how you got funding for your eco building.
So I think that the most important thing is share the experience and the knowledge, because I think this alternative is possible implement around the world, because each place have different resource that it's possible investigate, study, and implement. But it's very important that the people share the knowledge, and spaces like this are very important. I hope that you take this experience and promote for other people and trying to do the same. In respect by me, I'm very, very motivated with your experience, and it's time to implement this in my country too.
Thank you, Valeria. Are there any other comments on Karen's or Kathy's? Carolyn has a question also, a suggestion. We amplify our work multiple ways, applying for awards, sharing on webinars and conferences, and telling the story. And going out and telling the story has boosted our ability to get grants. So success breeds success. So I am going to move us forward because I'm a little bit concerned about our time. Kathy, could you move us to the next slide? Yeah, and Daphne was agreeing with Carolyn's comments. So what we would like to do at this point is, as seminar participants, as webinar participants, each of us is taking something away from this webinar. We'd like everyone to type in the chat pods an insight or a learning on the chat pod at the top left, and then one thing that's an implication for your work that we want to capture. And then we're going to have a very brief conversation on it. So this is the time for you to type, and I can see lots of people are doing it. It looks like we still have some typing going on here, guys. Lots of thoughts. Okay, it looks like we've got our comments out. I'm going to ask Carolyn if she would mind reading over the insights and learnings so we hear them. Is there something important about hearing and seeing?
So insights and learnings, dry toilets, hooray! CO2 refrigerants, designed for the human scale, is not a new concept, but one that is valuable to revisit and learn even more from. Lots of inspiration in these presentations for work and personal projects. Regeneration, not just reduction, is possible. Architecture that facilitates social interaction. A reminder about how important thinking about the design of a space is to creating opportunities for connection, the ongoing need for people to participate, to feel that they are contributing, and thus getting empowered themselves. Working with older buildings is possible. Generate delight for the world. 80% energy goal has support in a large government organization. These projects draw people together. CO2 refrigerant, definitely amazing. Broad participation is possible. Pilot projects are demonstrations that people relate to. Volunteer with Valeria and bring along a friend. Complete.
Okay, thank you. And Daphne, may I ask you to read over the implications?
Sure. Promote others' work zealously. Learn where the case studies of many projects are being stored and share that resource. Encouraging those who are in the trenches struggling with some hard work. Connecting people. Keeping the broadest input at the center of my thinking when I design events. What resources are available to inspire us as we facilitate meetings and trainings? Tour Daphne's building at the top gathering in Walnut Creek in January? You bet. Come on by. In addition to sustainable design, also revisiting localized materials and sharing all the results, good and bad, with the wider world so the good can be replicated and built upon. ICA has a role as a storyteller, promoter of demonstrations of ES works so that it's always great to hear about them and share the knowledge and continue working sustainably.
Thank you. And what I want to do now is I'd like, as you listen to these, you think about this session, I'd like to get 2 to 4 key themes that came out to you across the presentations, either from insights and learnings, implications, or just things that struck you as key themes. This is a notepad, so only I can type in it. So if you have something and you don't have a microphone, you can type it in the chat pod. But if you have a microphone, you can speak up and share a key theme we want to take away from this webinar.
Jane, this is Caitlin. I was struck with the idea that we were talking a lot about physical spaces, but that they were made possible by community, people coming together. So something about the dynamic between physical spaces made possible by people. I'm complete.
Thank you. And who else has a key theme?
This is Kathy. Today it was full of possibilities. Lots of hope.
What's the theme, Kath?
Oh.
Help again.
Possibilities for sustainability.
Like so many possibilities for sustainability. There are so many possibilities for sustainability. Does that capture it?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's get another couple. Themes that I see: hope, persistence, sustainability is never one thing. and we'll add those as well to this.
Hi, this is Jasmine. I'd like to add collaboration is key to success of different initiatives and projects.
Thank you, Jasmine. Are there any others that are just pressing to get out there? I'll capture the ones in the notepad.
I'll also just adding, maybe you just added to the collaboration one, but collaboration of many stakeholders. So the county had many different types of stakeholders, and it wasn't all the same people.
Thank you very much. Well, this information, these ideas will inform the team that's going to be doing the sustainability thread. And Kathy, if you could move us to the correct next pod. We're getting close to complete, but we still have some important things that we want to cover. And I'm going to hide that one because that one is no longer useful. I have been talking about the conference in January. And gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if Valeria and Apollo could come? Oh my gosh, that would be incredible. But it's a long trip from Ecuador. But the conference is all about participatory processes and how we as practitioners can improve our skills and our inspiration for using them to help clients and communities. The top methods are methods that are core to most of our practices, but they're not the only focus of the conference. And so these are the dates of the conference, and one of the sessions in the conference is the social impact areas on Sunday afternoon that we're going to have for 4 hours. We have a hunk of time for people who will go into one of these 4 and really focus and go deeper into the conversation. This 2-hour webinar is wonderful, but we know that we could have so many more conversations, and that's the intent of these social impact areas. So one, we invite you to attend. Oh my gosh, Ruth, it would be so incredible if you and Ken could come and participate, and all of us be there to help have this important conversation. And Caitlin, you said it so well, it's the interaction between social community and the actual technology of doing things. And if it's just one side, it's not going to work. So we invite you, we want you to know about it. And then we also have one more webinar coming up where one of our great colleagues, Marty Roach, is going to be talking about the Citizens Climate Lobby, particularly her work in Contra Costa County, which is focusing on how we can engage citizens every day in doing this work. And we have another presentation also from Ryan Bell, who is worked with Carolyn for a number of years and now is at the Office of Sustainability at the University of California System, Office of the President. And it's incredible to hear about the things they are doing on the UC campuses, but also with students who are going to go out in the world and make a difference in the world. And Ryan just led a cool challenge where, what was it, Carolyn, 22,000 hours of student activity in 4 weeks in August. So we're excited about the next webinar. We encourage you to attend and also to invite others to attend. And we also encourage you to put information in this chat pod on your recommendations for the sustainability groups work. So if you have things you would like them to see. And also file share is over here. We encourage you to download files that you think would be interesting to you, but also to upload files that can become a part of the biography. And for this particular one, I'm going to share with you the answer to this question. I don't know that I can scroll. There we go, and I'm going to try to broadcast the results. This is how you all saw. the question of how much more acidic have oceans become since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And I got this from a quiz that was put out by one of the environmental organizations, and the correct answer is 30%. So since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we have increased the acidity in our oceans by 30%. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Now I'm going to ask Kathy to shift us to our last slide. And we would appreciate any input or feedback you can give us on what worked well today in the webinar, what suggestions you have, and one thing you're taking away, and then we're just going to ask each of you to share a closing thought. What worked well today, what suggestions you have for better webinars. We've got one more. We'll learn from what you're saying. There's still a few more typing. And as we finish up the typing in the comments, I'm going to ask that each of you share one picture or phrase or image that comes to mind from what was said in the webinar today. Now, I'm thinking very, very concrete. So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to go down the list of attendees and ask you to respond. If you cannot respond by mic and speaking, I'd like you to respond in the chat box. So one image that stands out to me, one picture that stands out to me today from the webinar is Carolyn's green runway giving awards for environmental stars. And Caitlin, may I go to you next?
Yeah, the children and women building the community, the shelter, the structure, and I can see.
Yeah, the picture that Valeria had in there where they were standing and working on the outside of a wall and building it.
And Daphne, you're next.
I don't know. It's a bit of a collage, I'm afraid. I was really impressed with everybody's work. Sorry.
Okay, and we'll go on to Kathy.
Idea of the dry toilets and the great need there is around the globe. I am complete. Pass to Valeria.
Valeria, you'll need to unmute your mic.
Yes. It's bigger topic, dry baths, because it's necessary to consider many things. But in resume, the principal idea is replace the clean water. It's not an eternal resource. It's a resource that in many parts of the world, it's ending. Many people in Africa and some places of South America don't have water. However, the people are lost and don't care the water. So the principal activity to contaminate the clean water is with the bathrooms. And we did an investigation to study different conditions to replace the water for a dry material. It includes many things, and it's necessary study each case in each weather, the humidity, the bacteria in the place. It's a scientific topic, but it's not hard to implement, and it's possible. And sometimes it's possible complement with lombricultura. I don't know the exactly word in English, but it's using insects to clean the compost. In our
Thank you, Valeria. Thank you for the response. This needs to be just a real quick one, and we could go much more with what you're saying. Apollo, you are welcome to write a comment in the chat box, and let's go to Jasmine.
For me, the image of the bench, the public installation stood out, just highlighting the importance of social bonds, and but also doing some community awareness at the same time because it's in a public space.
Thank you.
The image that stands out to me is just being able to use the materials that are right under our feet to build.
Yeah, I was thinking about the awards and how motivating they are, even the smallest awards and the biggest awards across all of them. I'm complete.
Thank you. And Ruth wrote a comment, thank you for the work that has gone into the projects presented in the presentations. And I want to echo that. Thank you, all of our presenters. And I also want to give a special thanks to Kathy McGrain, who's been remarkable in helping us do the technology on this. I don't think Caitlin or I could ever have done this without Kathy's participation and patience and finding many ways to do things that were impossible to do, and she figured it out. We hope that we will see you all at the next webinar. I'm going to ask our faculty to stay online for just a moment, and we'll have a chance to talk about your experience of the webinar, and we'll say goodbye to the rest